Welcome to Reflections from WT, the heart and soul of the Texas Panhandle. I'm Randy Ray, and I'm joined today by Dr. Walter Wendler, the president of West Texas A&M, and you're joining us on a very special episode. This is episode number 13, which celebrates our one-year anniversary.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1 year we've been doing this.
Yeah, and it's been a good year. I hear comments from people, mostly positive. As a matter of fact, I've never heard a negative comment about the podcast. People appreciate the communication. It's available. It's on the website. People get notified. They can check it out and listen. And a lot of these programs are interesting to people on the campus.
I appreciate you asking me to do it. I really enjoyed it. I was talking to a young man the other day, and he was talking about the podcast. He's kind of a young kid. I'm surprised he listens to podcasts, but he was asking me about the principal at WT. And I said, well, he's really the president, but in some ways, you kind of are the principal here, I guess.
Yeah.
How are you like a principal, and how are you not?
Well, I'm like a principal in my mind anyway, at least I would say a good principal, in that my first concern is always about students. I want to see students get a chance to meet their aspirations, to succeed and to have a chance to engage themselves positively. And, if you followed me around on a day-to-day basis, you might say, gosh, how does this work relate to the students? But if it's for me personally, I have to be able to connect the dots back to student development and student engagement and the quality of the educational experience. We just recently finished buff branding, as we start the school year. And the fact of the matter is that's all about students, and it's fun. The students had a good time. You can tell. Missy, of course, is joined into that as its leader, and it does a great job, and she'll probably say a word about that later. But the point is, I like it because it shows students a fundamental precept about life, that you can join something that's larger than you are. You don't always have to be about self. You can join something that's larger than you are and engage that and get a benefit from it. And they were having fun, and that's a good benefit. I especially like the fact that, that people were there and they were sober and all that sort of thing. I mean, when I mean sober, I mean literally they hadn't been drinking and all that carrying on, because if you just walked into the place, you might think they had been drinking. They get all revved up, and it's a lot of fun. But I think that's engaging for students. Not everybody. Some people may say, that's a little bit too much. I'd rather go read Shakespeare in the library. Okay, well, that's fine. Or I'd rather go play baseball or whatever. But it's a way for people to become part of a community. And in that sense, I think the principal's role and the president's role is very similar, as a kind of a leadership role to try and keep that before people.
Yeah, so you're dealing with students, but your job is also kind of like a CFO or a CEO, I guess, of a big company. People probably don't realize what a big just business that running a university is.
It is a huge business. Our budget is, it's shy of $150 million, but it's a lot of money. Our payroll is just shy of $70 million, but for comparison, as an example, CISD has a payroll, which is the Canyon Independent School District, and it's a big district. Has a payroll of about $50 million. Ours is $70 million. I'm only giving that as a way for people to calibrate the size of the organizations, because there's schools all over and teachers and everything. I mean, there's a lot of investment in that. We have just finished, and soon we'll be publishing an economic impact study, and it's safe for me to say that this study, done by a very reputable firm, a national firm that does university studies and economic impact, $745 million per year is the estimated impact of WT. That's a huge impact on the community. And it's not just Canyon, it's the whole Panhandle. Canyon and Amarillo first, Randall and Potter counties, and then beyond. So it's a business, but it's a business that is focused on students first. And I am absolutely convinced if we don't put students first, that economic impact of $700 and almost $50 million will go down rather than up. I think if we put students first, our economic impact will increase. And it's just that simple.
I agree with you. And speaking of students, it's nice to have them back.
It is, Randy. I like it because it puts a cadence in the week. Monday you start class. I just was talking to a freshman on the second floor of Old Main, and She's been here for 2 years. She's from Paradise, Texas. And she, of course, yesterday was her first day of classes, and she's taking a class this morning at 8 o'clock, and you see how anxious she was over there about 7:25, ready to go to class. And then another fellow showed up. But she was from Paradise, which is about 5.5 hours south down by Fort Worth. But, when you see that, you recognize, and you can see it in their eyes. Their eyes are sparkling, even at 7:30 in the morning, at least most of them. And they're excited. They are excited about the program and what they're getting to do here. So we're very thankful for that rhythm of the students being here.
Yeah, I agree. I love the fall for a lot of different reasons, but one of the reasons I love fall is football. And we have a big reason to celebrate football in the fall. We have a brand new stadium.
Yeah.
And we've talked a lot about that, but it's just so exciting. And I love the fact that we're bringing football back to the campus, and just the vibe that it's going to create on game day. You were talking about that atmosphere at Buff Branding earlier. I think it's going to be that atmosphere on game day.
I do too.
And it's going to be across the campus. It's not going to be just students. It's going to be people that live in Amarillo and the Panhandle. I think it's going to be a day that really sets the entire Panhandle on fire.
I agree with you, Randy. I don't know what the ticket sales are doing. I know we're going along pretty well, and I expect a big crowd. And I'm an architect, so I go over there and look at the stadium. I'm not surprised. I mean, I had some sense of what it was going to look like. But when I get there, yesterday I went over. I took I can't remember who went over now. Oh, John Smithy's chief of staff came to visit the campus, Representative Smithy, and we went over and visited the stadium, and they had put the artificial turf on the slopes in the end zones, and it's this beautiful green, emerald green thing, which, of course, in Amarillo, in this part of the world, any kind of dense green like that is pretty rare, but it is dense. It reminds me of Yankee Stadium when I went there with my dad. We'd sit up on the third deck. The seats were steep. They're steep here, and you'd look down onto that emerald green, that turf. There were, of course, natural grass back then, but you'd look down onto that stuff and you'd think, my gosh, this is, talk about Paradise, Texas. It's not 5 hours from here, down by Fort Worth. It's right here. And that stadium on the 6th, we have the ribbon cutting. On the 7th, the first game against Azusa Pacific, 6 p.m. I would encourage people that support WT and the Texas Panhandle to be out for this, because it is going to be a big deal. On campus, first time, 60 years. 60 years since we took a snap or had a kickoff on the campus.
And we'll be having events all day long.
All day long, and starting on Friday.
Yeah.
When
are we unveiling the White Buffalo? Is that on the 6th?
Yes, that's going to be on the 6th.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. And we've talked about this too, but that White Buffalo is just special to me.
Well, it is. It's neat, and they scraped 100 pounds of paint off of that. That's a lot of paint. Yeah. But it's all been. Somebody said we gave it a manicure. We did. I mean, it's all cleaned up. It's. I guess a buffalo would get a pedicure. I don't know. I'm not much on all that, but whatever it is, it is going to be. It's going to be pristine. As a matter of fact, it's covered. It's got a cover on it. They have spotlights on it, and the lights were all on this morning when I drove. But I come to work about 6, a little before, and the lights were all on, and I thought, man, this is magnificent. Yeah. And I look in there and see that grass, that turf, and it's magnificent. It's a big deal. It's a big deal.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to Missy Macon, and we're going to talk to her about some of the pillars of leadership here on campus. We'll be back in about 60 seconds.
West Texas A&M University is proud to call the Texas Panhandle home, and providing the top 26 counties with opportunity and qualified graduates is an important WT mission. From their first experience on campus to graduation day, the WT experience is a challenging series of steps that will embolden our students to reach their full potential, and then, in turn, go out into the Panhandle and make a difference. Quality education with a big local return is one thing you can find here at WT. For more information about West Texas A&M University, visit our website at WTAMU.edu.
Welcome back to Reflections from WT, the heart and soul of the Texas Panhandle. This is our 13th episode, and we have a very special guest today. We are talking to Missy Macon. Missy, it's good to have you.
Good morning. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you and I go back a ways.
You do.
You were a communication student, and you graduated in 2003 with your undergrad, right?
Yes, sir.
Over in the old Fine Arts building.
That's
Did
right.
you ever have a class with me?
No, I did not, actually.
You got lucky. Yeah. So you were an advertising PR major, right?
Right.
And So how does that apply to what you're doing today?
You know, it's kind of a funny transition from that to what I'm doing today, because you wouldn't kind of see the connection at all. I mean, I did a couple of things. So as soon as I left WT, I did some on-air fundraising for KCV TV, which is a whole different ballgame. But it was a lot of fun. Learned a lot of things. Eventually kind of found myself in a federal grant actually called Gear Up, and I worked for them for 5-6 years, I think. And through that, realized that I really liked working with students, and we did some leadership development stuff there. And long story short, I found my way back through a friend who worked here, and she just said, they posted this job. I think you'd be interested in it. And I looked at it and thought, yes, I would absolutely love that. And I have loved every day since.
Yeah. And so you are, I don't know, you the leader of, what is it? Pillars of Leadership. Tell us about that.
I would love to. So I'm actually the leadership coordinator in the Office of Student Engagement and Leadership. And so I work with a variety of leadership programs on campus. And as we're kind of, talking about everything that's going on campus and all the different programs, we, wanted to see if we could find a way to connect those dots for students. So we worked on a framework in just our office with the programs that we worked with, and of course, connected them to CAS standards and to student leadership competencies, and then back to, we started with the 5 practices of exemplary leadership, and we mapped kind of all of the programs that we do in our office to those things. And through that, noticed that we have some very common things that kept popping out at us, and similarities in programs, but nothing connected, because you didn't realize that with the language. And so we decided that we needed to find something that would connect the dots for students and make sure that they understood that they were gaining these leadership skills in multiple different programs. My supervisor, Kimberly Cornelson, and I went to a conference in last December, and Tulane University does something kind of similar to this. And so we thought, you know what, that would be a great idea for our students to actually recognize the skills that they're gaining. And so by doing the framework, we identified common themes and then tied them back to leadership principles and pillars that we hope will one day soon become like a common leadership language on campus.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to talk about those pillars a little bit. And Dr. Wendler, I'd like to just chime in too. I want to talk about these, what are there, 8 different pillars? I want to talk about these pillars, and I would like each one of you to just kind of reflect a sentence or two about what you think about that particular pillar. The first one is exemplary character. How do you feel? Should a leader have good character?
Absolutely. I think they should. And I think it starts from the very beginning. They recognize their belief systems and the things that they're going to stand for, and staying true to those things.
Yeah. And I think WT is an especially important place to do this, because the character of the people of the Texas Panhandle is so genuine and so sincere, and it's geared towards hard work and personal responsibility. And I just think that is so important. And Missy in those leadership programs reinforces it. I see it in those students.
Absolutely. What about a sense of responsibility, Missy?
Dr. Wendler just mentioned that, and we really are trying to help them take ownership of those things, good, bad, and, just make sure that then if it is maybe they made a poor choice or something, that they take responsibility for that, recover from it, and move on and do better from that, but really owning those things.
I couldn't agree more, and I think that's why it's so good to be transparent with students and with the people that we work with. And when you make a mistake, you own it. You own the mistake. If you speak inappropriately, or if you do something that's nonsensical, whatever it might be, own it, and people like it.
Absolutely.
And it's a way to draw people closer to you by being human and recognizing errors, and also being willing and humble to accept praise when it's due. But I think this idea of owning is very important.
I also think that a good leader knows how to pull together a good team, and a good leader knows how to be collaborative and have good relationships within that team. So y'all talk about teamwork.
We do teamwork in every aspect. All day long at work, you are working with teams and groups. And so if we aren't instilling those good ideas and thoughts in students right now about how do you be a good team member, and how do you work effectively with a team, to move the goal forward and things like that, then we aren't doing a very good job, I don't think, of educating them. And so helping them realize the good things that they can do by working with a team, and that they'll go so much further with a team than they will by themselves, I think is an important place to start here at WT.
Yeah,
I agree. Yesterday, we had a meeting with the planning group, which is a pretty good-sized group. There's about 40 people in it that are getting ready for the first home football game in 60 years. And right now there's a lot of anticipation and so on about this first game, and a lot of there's nerves. People are worried. How's the traffic going to flow? How are we going to make sure people get where they need to go? How is the food service going to work? And one thing after the other. And there was a time when there was some tension in the air, but everybody soon remembered that we're working on this as a team. We have a common goal, which is to have a great game day experience for West Texas A&M University, and then they submitted themselves to the team, which I think is very important.
What about professional competence? Tell us what that means.
We really want them to know, like, you're gaining these skills and what's appropriate behavior, both in the classroom, outside of the classroom, in the workplace, and what that looks like and how it can help, understanding the skills that you're gaining and that will help you be more marketable, but then also following the, proper chain of command, that you maybe just don't go straight to Dr. Wendler when you have a problem, right? Like, there's people that you can talk to in the middle of it that can solve your problem or kind of help you through whatever situation that you're facing, and help them do that in a responsible way and things like that.
Dr. Wendler, when you hire someone, you've got to think about professional competence.
Oh yeah. As a matter of fact, I would say that's all we think about, but it's not all we think about. We also want to think about relational skills and being able to be a member of a team and so on and so forth. But being able to do the job that you're asked to do is exceedingly important. I have seen in my long tenure since 1975 of being at universities, the biggest mistakes that are made are putting people that don't yet have the competence to be in the job that they're in, and it's not their fault. I mean, they just haven't had the experience or the training, and that's leadership's responsibility to make sure that the person's abilities and what's expected of them fit together. Because if you don't, it's a challenge.
And I think too, with that, students, helping them understand that you can't, there's a process to gaining that competence too. And you have to gain those skills by experience. And so you might, when they leave us, they may not have, be the one at the top of the food chain immediately, but they have to work to that, and helping them understand that that's a good thing, so that then they don't get themselves in a situation that they aren't comfortable with.
What's that thing where people rise to the level of their competency?
Peter Principle?
Yeah.
They get to the Peter Principle says that they get to a level where they're, they keep rising until they get to a place where they're incompetent.
Yeah.
That's not a very, kind of upbeat thing to talk about, but it happens.
There's some truth to it.
Yeah, there is some truth to it.
Strengths in action is another pillar, and I this one really struck to me because it talks about knowing one's own strength, and I've had to learn my own strengths and my own weaknesses too, and tell me what your strength is, and talk about that a little bit.
So, funny thing that I have my strength shirt on today, and we, as a strengths-based campus, we help students identify and recognize those strengths, the things that they're most good at, those talents that they naturally have, and develop into skills. And so positivity is my number one strength, and I think I use that a lot every day, just encouraging students, seeing the good side and seeing, okay, it's not the end of the road. How can we get past this? And really maintaining a positive attitude. And I think that as we help students identify those and they understand more about them and they become more comfortable with them, then they understand how they can be a better teammate, how they can be a better roommate, how they can be a better coworker when they understand themselves, and then also understand others and their strengths and say, how can I compliment you? Or what's the strength that you bring to the table that I don't have? And recognizing that that's not necessarily a bad thing, but make sure that your team was well-rounded and that you can have, you can lean on somebody else in a time that you don't have that strength necessarily.
Yeah, I think that those are all good points. My strength, I think, is ideation or something. That's kind of an odd word, but I generate ideas. It seems to me easily. I sit in my rocking chair and I think about things, and ideas come to me. I wish every once in a while I could stop it. I mean, it's almost like a disease because you don't get one thing finished and you're thinking about something else. But I actually think that helps a team because there's a fresh flow of things to think about, and at times it can be overpowering. But one, I think, of the greatest strengths is to learn while you work, and I think that's very important. That's what's important, I think, about transparency and admitting mistakes and everything. Randy, you said you've had to learn your strengths, and I know you're continuing to learn your strengths. You're not finished. You're not a finished work yet. You're being, in my language, you're being perfected. It takes time, and there's a process there. And someone might look at me and say, "Oh, he's an old man. He's got everything figured out." I've got very little figured out. But when you recognize that and keep working to make progress towards a high aspiration, I think that's a great thing, and that can be a powerful strength, I think, to learn.
Two things about what you said. One is you talked about people's different strengths, and I think that diversity, all kinds of diversity, makes us a stronger unit, stronger team. So I believe in diversity. And Dr. Wendler, you talked about that idea thing. When I teach my management class, we look at all these different characteristics of a leader, and one thing always sticks out more than anything else, and that's vision. And I think you have vision, and you have a vision for WT, and that's what WT 125 is all about. So I think that's a big, strong thing that we need to look for in leaders, and we need to develop in our leaders.
Absolutely.
Another pillar is cultural humility.
I think this one really speaks to the fact that our campus is becoming more diverse, and the workplace and anywhere, even, in the Texas Panhandle, everything is becoming more diverse, and really understanding, valuing others' identities and perspectives and opinions, and having be able to have some civil discourse with them and understand where they're coming from. Not necessarily that you have to agree with them or disagree with them, but understanding, being willing to listen and being open-minded about some things and being able to have a conversation can get you a long way.
I would agree, and sometimes that's difficult for me. I have my ideas and I feel strongly about them and so on and so forth, but in the end, having an open mind and an open heart, I think, is the most important thing. I think sometimes people will confuse a strongly held belief with a predisposition or some other kind of something, and I don't think that's the case. As long as your heart is open to listen to people and hear where they are, it doesn't mean you have to give up or sacrifice the things that you think are important. So it is important, and I think Missy is spot on. The fact of the matter is our culture is changing. Our university is 25% Hispanic, which reflects the population of the Texas Panhandle. It's 5% African American. These are student populations. Our faculty and staff populations are not as diverse as our student populations, but in terms of Hispanics and African Americans, we represent the population of the Panhandle. And that's one very obvious kind of distinguishing characteristics, but personal beliefs and religious beliefs and other things that we identify with are also constantly changing and developing. And we need both open minds and open hearts, I think.
We talked about hearts. Another pillar is a heart for service.
Yeah.
Well, earlier you were mentioning how, the people of the Panhandle are genuine and hardworking. And I think I see in the Panhandle people that are just willing to help with drop whatever they're doing. I was actually visiting with a lady from Dalhart yesterday, and her business had somehow caught on fire and the whole thing was gone. And she said everybody in that community just really pitched in. One of the banks said, "Hey, come use some of our office space, whatever you need." And everybody's just willing to give what they have to help them. And I think WT is like that also. And when we instill that principle and that mindset in students early on, they realize how good it feels to give back and what a difference it can make. So at Buff Branding, like we were talking about earlier, we did a huge service project with over 500 people, and we packed 50,000 meals for the High Plains Food Bank. And watching the students really enjoy that moment is probably one of my favorite parts of Buff Branding, because they they get to see the physical impact and how much food we packed in, an hour and a half, I think, and loaded onto the truck, and then see the impact that it can have in our community. And instilling that early, I think, is important. And I think the university does a good job of that as well.
Well, I do too, and the only reason we can do a good job is, as you just point out, Missy, it comes from the community, it comes from the culture up here. I think it's trying to battle these high plains, the Texas Panhandle, trying to battle the weather. People have tried to scratch out a living out of the ground up here. It's tough. Or trying to get oil out of the ground, or water out of the ground, or go get cotton to grow, or feed cattle or cows up here. Now dairy is growing up. All these things. Everything is a challenge. Nothing is easy. And almost everything we do, it would be easier somewhere else. And it creates in people, I think, a sense of purpose and shared responsibility and service.
Yeah, I agree. Last one, transformational growth.
This is probably my favorite one, and I think because I get to see students from, the beginning of their journey, just because of where I am, to the end, and watching them really recognize those skills in themselves and see the potential that they had, that came to fruition, and they did the hard things in all areas, is so important for me, and it really kind of gives me that fire inside to keep going and moving, because I feel like with this one, you see the difference. And when they can recognize that difference in themselves is so exciting to see. It's just like they have a light in their eyes and they're like, oh my gosh, I did all of these things. And so developer is also one of my strengths. To see this in students is one of my favorite things.
Yeah, you talk about the ability to embrace challenges, take risk, and perseverance. I think that makes a big leader. Well, we always end our podcast, Missy, with what I call throwing you guys a curveball.
Okay.
You ready?
Sure.
This one's kind of weird.
They're all kind of weird.
I would like you to tell me, what's the weirdest thing you've ever eaten? Silence. Do you need to think about it for a minute? I will tell. While you guys think about it, when I thought about this question, the first thing that came to my mind was I grew up in a Baptist church, and we had a lot of socials, and those after church socials, I've eaten some weird stuff there, and I still don't know what they
don't know what it is.
That might explain a lot of things, right? I'll tell you the weirdest thing I've ever eaten. It's not that weird, but it was weird to me because I'd never had it before. Was chicken livers. I'd never eaten those before, and I've eaten them one time. The first time I had them, and the last time I had them. But I tend to like. I call it kid food. I like hamburgers, hot dogs, pizza. I could eat that stuff. French fries. I could eat that stuff every day. Every day. If it's on a bun, I want it.
Dr. Wendler, I know you believe in studying abroad, and when you've been in other countries, I'm sure you've had some weird stuff.
Oh yeah. I was in the Blue Moon. Tempura house in Tokyo, and it's a famous tempura house, and they bring in these fresh critters, and they have these big vats of boiling oil, and they hold the critters up so you can see they're still alive to attest to their freshness, and then they throw them in this vat. And they get cooked to death, but it's just as fresh as you can get. Oh, I've eaten some weird stuff in Vietnam, in Taiwan, in China, in Japan, but most of it has to do with critters. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I went to the doctor one time. I know we're running out of time, but I'm going to tell a story. I went to the doctor one time. I had a sinus infection, and I was getting ready to go to Hanoi, and I said, I'm worried about being sick, Brian. He said, well, I'm going to give you this Z-Pack. You can take this medicine. That'll take care of that part of it. I said, you got any other advice? He said, yeah. He said, don't eat anything that looks like fishing bait.
Don't eat the bait. Yeah.
Anyway.
I did have some students one time bring me some, speaking of critters being cooked in oil, grasshoppers. And from,
deep-fried grasshoppers. How were they? Crunchy? Were they crunchy?
I couldn't even... Like, they brought them to me and really, really wanted me to eat them, and I just couldn't do it. They were kind of disappointed in me, but I'm not quite that tough, I don't think.
No. Well, we are a little bit over, but that's okay. We've had a good conversation today. Thank you for joining us for Reflections from WT, the Heart and Soul of the Texas Panhandle. Be sure and join us again next time for episode number 14. We'll see you then.